ready for this afternoon, the breakout sessions, the plenary, the Selena karaoke. Who brought their Selena outfits? Come on, raise your hand. All right. The white, red, the burgundy one, the red one, which outfit? Tomorrow we're going to have a great breakfast, and then we want to invite everyone to join in on the conversation we're having in the full room tomorrow. We have our strategic plan, we have our mission, we have our vision, we got our values, we got our goals. I know we've all seen it on the website. What we want to do is work out with you how we make those words, those statements, into our theory of how we take action. Words that really translate into what we're going to do and what we are doing. But we want to make it clear, and we want to get community input. A lot of people call it the theory of change, and we're calling it the theory of action. So for tomorrow morning, before you leave, and we'll also have some box lunches for you. We want to make sure you participate in that. We want to hear your voices, so that's important. So right now, we're going to hear from Gonzalo Valdez, who is a senior organizing leader at the Sierra Club, and he's going to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon. Gonzalo, welcome. Big hand.
First of all, I'd like a huge shout out to the wait staff that is making this event possible. And also on a similar note, a huge shout out to the Latino staff that made this something possible. Who's not here with us, Irene, Juan Roberto, Jessica, Marisa, Eric, Olivia, Rosario, Natalia, Dharma, Patricia, Cumbia, Ana Escareta, Pedro, and Sarah and Amanda. Huge shout out to them. So it is my pleasure to introduce Ramón Cruz, who is the president of Sierra Club, an environmental policy advocacy expert. Previously, he served as deputy director of Puerto Rico's Environmental Regulatory Agency. He is the first and only president of Sierra Club who is also a Latino. So let's give a huge round of applause. It is my honor to present you all Ramón Cruz.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Gonzalo. Hello, everyone. You actually did part of my speech when you thanked Good Latinos, but I'll do it again very soon if I figure this out. All right. You can hear me, right? All right. So, hello, everyone. Buenos días. Buenas tardes. It's an honor to be able to say some words to you. It is also a source of joy and ultimately a privilege, to be here, to gather again in person, to start feeling human again, and spend time in community. I want to acknowledge that because, the last few years have been very difficult for many of us, and, not being able to be with each other. This summit was certainly not like this in the last few years. The pandemic, took a lot of that humanity, and also, many loved ones with it. So I want to acknowledge that and remember those loved ones that are no longer with us. And I wanted to also acknowledge Good Latinos for bringing us together. If I may ask the staff that Gonzalo just named to quickly, stand up so that we can celebrate you. and thank you and recognize you. Thanks so much. As Gonzalo said, I'm the president of the Sierra Club nationally. This is also my last appearance, as what has been a highlight of my career serving as Sierra Club president. I'm turned off after 3 years, so I cannot run again. But there's a great team. Lisa Chin, a great mentor to me, and the first president of color of the Sierra Club was elected again to the position. And we hired Ben Jealous, former head of NAACP, as the new executive director. And the president figure is usually much more internal and in charge of the chapter structure and volunteers and report to the board, while the executive director manages the day-to-day and is the external figure. But my tenure was a bit different because we didn't have an executive director for a couple of years. So many of those responsibilities and the external facing of the organization was more on me. So, the 3 years have been very difficult for any organization, not only the Sierra Club. I started my tenure with COVID, basically. Then, George Floyd and all the reckoning that followed that, and with that, exploring all the different difficult origins of the Sierra Club, and I will go back to that later. But also negotiating union contracts, navigating, difficult economic downturns that led us to first voluntary layoffs, accounts of harm, racism, sexual harassment, assault, systemic racism, all the accountability reforms, then the elections, the Trump elections, Biden presidency with the IRA incentives, but also the sacrifice zones that it creates. So, this is only a few things of the last 3 years. So, the ride has not been easy. My beard is much wider now than it was 3 years ago. And as leaders, you may seek to nourish yourselves and to learn and build skills, and you may choose to lead or not, but you cannot choose, the time and the context when you lead. And this certainly has not been easy, and for many of you, all of you leaders in this room, it's the future also will take some difficult, we're approaching difficult times, as you know. So, we have to buckle up for those challenges, and you're never prepared enough. But it is important to build teams, to do self-care. I cannot emphasize enough what Jose Gonzalez told us yesterday morning, and the importance of self-care, take care of yourselves, and also relying on others to do that, and to trust. And that's something very, very important. You're all leaders here. I mean, if you're here, you have certainly that privilege, and therefore that responsibility, and other people trusting you, and your communities trusting you. So be sure that you take care of yourselves and you nourish yourselves. In order to give back to your communities. There's no such thing as a self-made person. We have a community, people or circumstances that support us. So be sure to give back. And I'm sure if you're here, you have already accepted that challenge. But it is always important to remind ourselves. And I was wondering here, how many here are under 30 years old? Just not under 35 years old. This is under 40 years old. Wait, how come there's less now than before? Some of you are not telling the truth. But anyway, I wanted to, in this position, sometimes I'm asked, what message I have for young people. And I usually say, thanks for the hope and inspiration, and also I'm deeply sorry because, my generation did not live up to our aspirations of, leaving a world better than we found it. And I really admire the clarity of the new generation and, how determined you are and how much, you follow science, how passionate you are about fixing many environmental harms from the parks and ensure that this is done in an equitable way, and how you're holding yourselves and us accountable. And that's, of course, very important to do the work that we do. And, at the same time, I want to say, that we should not lose the perspective that our major enemies are not coming from within, but it is still, the greed and the harm caused by a cruel economic system that is based on extractive industries. And we have to be sure that continues being, what we should put a lot of our effort. So, I definitely recommend. How many people have read here Most Mitchell's essay on building resilient organizations? Anybody? Wow, one hand there. Well, then let's definitely be sure that we send that, because there's a lot of important stuff there that we could be making a whole speech about it, or a whole session. But is this it? Yeah. So let's be sure, not to lose, the perspective that, the threat and the challenge that, to face the climate crisis is just too large, and we need everyone. So we cannot be a one-party issue. I know that in the U.S. context, we're associated, currently or mostly identified with the Democratic Party, but we need to be much more than that as a movement, and that's why community-based work is so important. Everyone in this time, the work with labor unions, the work with faith-based communities, the work with civil rights organizations, the work with reproductive rights organizations, indigenous communities, the intersectionality of our issues, is what defines this time. And in order to do that, we have to, in order to do what we have to do, we need to build coalitions big enough to win, big enough to face the biggest threat that humanity has ever faced, which is climate change. And defining this not just environmentally, but socially. I'm convinced that, that nobody wants to pollute just for the sake of polluting, right? Or that miners in West Virginia, wants to fill their lungs with coal, or, a community in Pennsylvania can frack the hell out of a river, of a mountain, and then pollute a river or watershed, or a town in Montana, just make a mountain disappear, and for that matter, an African nation, just sell all the resources or natural resources to foreign companies. So I'm sure, they don't want to do that just for the sake of doing it, but often they give it to all these extractive industries, because they need jobs, they need to eat, and the extractive industries know that, and pay miserable jobs, in order to do that. So, we have to, when we do our conservation work, just be sure that, it is not, the enemy is not just polluters, but, it is poverty, the social injustice that is killing this planet. And those, that's important to remember because, when we do the work that we do, we need to be sure, and ensure just transitions to win over the communities that we need as allies, facing the same employers that are keeping them down. We have to be sure that we provide economic opportunities to live dignified lives and to have sustaining jobs in order to save the environment. And so that's why we need to build coalitions big enough to win. You know, in order to do what we have to do, we have to reach out to others. You know, make Green Latinos grow, but also grow out of this coalition and make it bigger. You know, Martin Luther King used to say to his lieutenants, if you're too comfortable in your coalition, then your coalition is too small. You know, remember that. You know, if you're too comfortable in your coalition, then your coalition is too small. So I hope, you know, we take on that challenge to make this organization, your organizations, and this movement grow and reach out and get uncomfortable, because that is what it will take to do that. And to face, you know, what is the biggest challenge that we face. I think to finish, you know, I want to read something I wrote to Sierra Club. You know, in the time we published an essay on why it was important to explore our history as an organization. We acknowledge that before the great national parks that we were certainly instrumental in building or in developing, you know, the lands there belong to people that had been much better stewards than anybody that had come afterwards. And the way and methods that sometimes the U.S. government use and organizations like the one I represent now, you know, created great harms, especially in indigenous and black communities. You know, of course, it's debatable now, you know, whether John Muir, our founder himself, was or wasn't a racist, or if he was just a product of his time, like some people say, you know. But certainly at a moment when the Sierra Club was formed 132 years ago, there was already an abolitionist movement for a long time, for decades, and you know, and also that among our members, founding members, there were eugenicists and also people that had owned other people within their lifetime. And so that is, of course, part of our history. And this was something that in the summer of reckoning after the murder of George Floyd, we exposed that analysis, you know, that of course did not lack controversy, especially among our base. And, you know, I of course admire a lot the organization that I represent, and without a doubt, John Muir founded an organization that became a rocket ship within the conservation movement and helped preserve places, landscapes, bringing up knowledge together with it, and it morphed into a modern environmental movement around 50 years ago with the first Earth Day, and then all the bedrock environmental laws that survived attacks after attack in many years, and it's still happening, with the extractive industries and their allies in Congress. And, that same organization, of course, faced a lot of criticisms in the 90s, especially from the environmental justice movement. And, what organizations evolve, but I'm not saying it's by any means a perfect organization, but we have to remember that it's, that organizations, change like that and can evolve, and it's important to also hold them accountable too. So, it goes back, and the organization, I want to also recognize that I made a note here that, even though it hasn't been easy, and, I have been celebrated like the first Latino, of course, it wasn't just because of me. I was, I stand in the shoulders of giants that really, and especially the environmental justice community, that really fought to open the doors of organizations like this one to people like me. So, and so I have a commitment to continue that legacy, of course, and going back to that summer of reckoning when we were questioning our organization's journey, and many were not in agreement, and there was a big pushback of, stay in your lane, stay in the environmental lane, don't get involved into all these issues, and there was a lot of controversy, there was a lot of hate mail, there were a lot of threats. For me, I mean, it's easier. I'm in New York, so New York City, in Brooklyn, so it's easier to navigate that. But for some of the, executive director at the time, etc., we had to leave the house for some time, had to be on surveillance, had to be, that is real. That becomes real, at that moment. And so at that time, I wrote an op-ed in the San Francisco Chronicle, about the controversy, and there how I said how I wanted to share the role of environmental advocacy with as many people as possible. And so I wrote the following, and I will finish with this. I want you all to understand why it is important that Sierra Club's lane in the environmental movement. Sorry. I want you all to understand why it is important that Sierra Club's lane in the environmental movement be broad enough to include people like me. I want to share my story. I come from a colonized place where people are often discriminated against and robbed of agency by the leaders charged with our fates. I'm Puerto Rican, and I am Latino. I am American. Puerto Ricans are Americans, even if not by choice. I have 4 uncles that fought in the Korean War against their will. One of them died in battle. But many families like mine were able to thrive in this country thanks to access to opportunity, education, and privilege. If not for what some people call reverse discrimination, I would not be president of the Sierra Club today, and proudly and unapologetically the result of affirmative action programs. These were relatively short-lived efforts lasting just a couple of decades, meant to correct 4 centuries of denying women and people of color their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I would not have been able to attend an Ivy League school without affirmative action. Those programs do not exist today, and as a result, many students do not receive access to high-quality education. I'm also of mixed race. Before 1967, my parents would not have been able to get married in several states, as one was black and the other one white. The idea that people of different races shouldn't marry may seem absurd now, but many people were complacent about it back then. Perhaps they thought they were staying in their lane. In the same time period, the Sierra Club lane often excluded black people like my father or grandfather as members, as it was an invitation-only organization with some people that formerly owned other people. Things are different today, thanks in large part to people of color and white allies who fought to open the doors of these organizations to people like me. But this doesn't mean that there is no discrimination in the environmental movement. For many years, I was the darkest in the room, the one with the cute Spanish accent who speaks funny. Even though I can communicate in 4 languages, English is not my native tongue. Being conscious of that fact and how my race is perceived makes me always feel like I'm walking on eggshells, especially when entering halls of places like Princeton or big green groups like the Sierra Club. I suspect that most women and people of color would understand what I mean, as there is not an inherited confidence that comes from not being questioned or not doubting yourself, and that is privilege. The opposite is the feeling that you always have to compensate for a shortcoming that is just perceived as an inferior inherited condition. So that is why I cannot change lanes, because for me there is no other lane. The only progressive lane I can be in is one that recognizes and celebrates all my identities. I hope that Sierra Club supporters concerned about whether we focus on a narrow definition of the environment can find a way to broaden our idea of the Sierra Club's lane and help us build an organization and an environmental movement, for that matter, that is inclusive, that celebrates diversity, that fights climate change, as well as systemic racism, and centers equity and justice in everything we do.